all the nutrition, moving your body, taking your supplements. Like if you're building a house, they're kind of like your bricks. And
Yes.
you can have the best bricks in the world and you can be the best builder. But if you've got shaky foundations, which are your hormones, then you're
Mhm.
not going to be able to build the house you want to build. Hey, Claudia, thank you so much for having me. Really excited to talk to you and your audience today.
Let's start off with a little bit about who you are.
Sure, well, that's a big question. I'm a GP and a hormone doctor. I work in what I would call sort of like a holistic integrative medicine model. Big words, but all that means really is that I try to look at the person in front of me as an individual. And then based on that, I help the person in front of me create a health plan with basically taking all aspects of health into consideration. So, that can be prescribing, but also looking at supplements, lifestyle, changes in life that might be needed as well, and then also bringing in maybe what would be considered more alternative treatments. So, things like acupuncture or osteopathy. So, really just giving the person in front of me a varied plan if that's what they need. I'm not going to do stuff just for the sake of it, but, really look at things in a varied and tailored way for them.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's so important. I mean, I've always been a huge advocate of integrative and holistic medicine as well, because everything in our life is so interlinked that, like, traditional medicine, Western medicine, just doesn't really make sense. Like, looking, it's not looking at the root cause, which is always like the main issue that I think is important, right?
Yeah.
So I love your approach. I guess you were traditionally educated as a, conventional doctor. So what made you turn to this look at integrative medicine?
I mean, I always knew from a young age I wanted to be a doctor. And I think part of that is that my dad's a doctor. So obviously,
Yeah.
that had a big influence on me growing up. And that also came from a sense that I wanted to help people. But despite knowing I wanted to be a doctor, I never really knew what sort of doctor I wanted to be. That was never clear in my mind. So I went down the conventional training route and, obviously the conventional schooling, we've got to get certain grades. And hey, I've got Indian parents. So, that's also built into the culture that you've got to work hard and do well at school and then go and do a good degree. Very old school. I think things are different now, but growing up, it was very much, it was lucky that I wanted to be a doctor because in Indian culture, it used to be like, hey, look, there's three jobs, right? There's doctor or dentist, there's lawyer, and there's accountant, and that's it.
Yeah.
They're the only three jobs that exist in the world.
It
Um,
reminds me of Jay Shetty's podcast. There's a phrase that he always says, and because he also was brought up in a similar culture, I guess. And then he said, like in Indian culture, you're either a doctor, a lawyer, or a failure.
yeah, so
Right.
true. So true. So, I mean, in some ways, it was very lucky that I actually wanted to be a doctor and it wasn't forced
Yeah,
on me.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, that really came from a need or a want from childhood to help people. And
Mm-hmm.
I guess to be a valued member of society like my dad, who's a community GP. So yeah, I went to medical school to be a doctor. I did lots of different jobs and training. You do all the different specialities. And I enjoyed everything, but there wasn't one thing that was calling me. And then I was doing psychiatry for a few years. And I
Mm-hmm.
actually did psychiatry on the Isle of Wight. And it was so cool because the patients there, obviously, I was there to prescribe and do that part. But the patients there had such a holistic model of care. And like they'd have cooking classes and nutrition lectures and acupuncture and yoga and talk therapy. And obviously, I don't know if that is still the case, but when I was there, that's what was happening. And then when I moved to my next psychiatry job somewhere else, I was like, hey, when's the cooking classes? And they were like, are you crazy? There's no cooking classes.
Oh my
And
gosh.
Yeah, I think that early experience just showed me how well the holistic model of care works and how you can
Mm-hmm.
integrate the prescribing with sort of lifestyle and talking and acupuncture and yoga and movement of the body. So that had a huge impact on me. And
Mm-hmm.
then from there, I thought, well, maybe I'll become a GP like my dad. Because one of the things I remember about that growing up is that I kind of grew up in a smallish village in Wales, and he knew everyone, right? So he knew the the patients and their children and their parents, and he knew which school they went to and where they worked down the road. So it seemed like he really understood the fabric of the community. So I thought, well, maybe if I'm a GP, I'll have that similar experience. But I'm sure if anybody knows anything about the current GP system, it's just really not like that at the moment. It's really about, short appointments, getting people in and out. You don't see the same people all the time. So when I started in that role, I kind of saw that that wasn't the model of care that I was after. And then I found a book on integrative medicine by this amazing doctor called Mark Atkinson, who does all sorts
Right.
of
What was the
amazing
book called?
things. I think it was called the Mind Body Bible.
Okay.
It's quite an
Yeah.
old book, but like when I found it, it was literally again like one of those epiphany moments, like doing the work in on the Isle of Wight. It was like, aha, I'm not the only person who wants to practice in this way. There is somebody else who's gone before me, and I actually did some training with him after in integrative medicine, and that was amazing to help inform my practice today. Um, and basically he really looked at the conventional medicine, but then all the other things that could be impacting you. So it was very much about moving your body, because that has a huge impact on your physical health, and also looking at things like
Mm-hmm.
mindfulness, and then also
Mm-hmm.
looking at the toxins in our environment and our food
Mm.
and how we manage our stress. And, you know, I feel like he was a real trailblazer in this space. I'm not sure he gets enough credit for it because now, of course, there's lots of lifestyle medicine and functional medicine. But I feel like he was one of the first people doing it in the UK. I discovered his book in something like 2008, maybe. So I think he's like really incredible. Um, so then I started doing my sort of like GP nutrition consultations. So I was looking at how people ate and recommending moving their body more and taking supplements and trying to eliminate toxins and doing
Yeah.
slightly more functional medicine testing. By
Yeah.
the way, functional medicine is just looking at the root cause of what caused the problem for the patient. I mean, I say it like it's really simple. It's not always that simple because there's so many different factors that could
Of
impact your
course.
health.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I really started looking at that. And then, sometimes I'd see results and sometimes I wouldn't. And to be honest, I didn't really understand why. I didn't see a pattern in it. And then I met someone who's actually a coach I was working with. And she said to me, "Oh my God, I've been to this amazing clinic in London and they looked at my hormones and they've balanced it with body identical and bioidentical hormones. And I feel so much better." And I thought, aha, that must be the missing piece of the puzzle. So, because she was my coach, she actively encouraged me to reach out to the clinic. And then eventually I ended up working there for a few years while I kind of again looked at the model of medicine I wanted to work in. And what I
Mm-hmm.
kind of saw was that, all the nutrition, moving your body, taking your supplements, like if you're building a house, they're kind of like your bricks. And
Yes.
you can have the best bricks in the world and you can be the best builder. But if you've got shaky foundations, which are your hormones, then you're
Mm-hmm.
not going to be able to build the house you want to build. So that's kind of informed the way I practice at the moment.
Mm. Okay, because I do know you talk a lot about hormone health, and you say that it's like the basics, like the foundation of everything. But just now your metaphor was really interesting because I almost thought it was the opposite. Like the taking these nutrients, balancing your nutrients and supplements will help you improve your hormones.
I know what you mean. There's definitely an interplay between the
Yeah, yeah,
two.
yeah.
And I sometimes see patients who come in to see me for some sort of hormone imbalance. That could be menopause, perimenopause, it could be very severe PMS, it could be fertility, all sorts of different hormonal issues. And they'll say to me, look, I'm taking the hormones and I'm not sure I feel better. I'll say to them, but like, look at your lifestyle. Your nutrition isn't
Mm,
great. You're not moving your body. You're drinking excessively. You're very stressed out in your job or with your family. So there's definitely an interplay between the two. And then equally, I see a lot of people who are doing all the right things, eating well, exercising, and they feel terrible. And that's because there's a hormone imbalance. So there's definitely a synergy between the two. I guess it just depends where you are on the spectrum.
so what would be the first types of things you ask a client to figure out whether they have a hormone imbalance or not?
I'll just go back to the analogy though, actually, and when I came up with that epiphany. And I guess it was from a place of being a sort of conventional GP and seeing people who are doing all the right things, but they still have this issue, whatever it may be. And then it was like, aha, it's because the foundations are shaky. So the hormone balance. So I guess it all depends where you are and what's going on in your health. So
Mm,
if I give you an example, I think the best place to start is by tracking. Because say you come to see me in clinic, say you come, Claudia, right? And say, I don't know you, I don't know anything about you. We have a limited amount of time together. And let's
mm-hmm,
remember, I can only really go off what you tell me in that time. So
mm-hmm,
if you come in, I can still probably figure things out just from like experience and, having seen many people. But if you come in with some data about yourself, then that's going to help me do my job better. So
mm-hmm,
I always say to patients, like, I might be the doctor, but you have to become the expert in yourself. So
mm-hmm,
if somebody comes in and tells me, look, I think my mood is noticeably different in the second half of my cycle, or, my energy is really poor, or I can't find words, I will believe them because, they inhabit their body all the time. They've lived with themselves over
mm-hmm,
all these years. And then
mm,
what's my job is to kind of figure out what's going on from the hormone side,
yeah.
or nutrition or managing stress to try and help those symptoms. So I think the best way to start is by becoming like your own sort of detective and spending some time tracking your symptoms. Because
Mm,
like if you come into me and say, oh, my mood is low, and I'll be like, okay, but like, have we tracked that to your cycle? How long is your cycle? How many days do you bleed? How do you feel just before your period? How do you feel on your period? Those should be relatively easy questions for you to answer if you've been monitoring your cycle, right? And
yeah.
then we can then see if there's a link with your hormones. Because you might say to me, hey, look, I just feel completely low all the time. It's not worse before my periods, it's not worse on my period, it's just constant. And then that doesn't mean I tell you to leave my clinic, no way. But it just means that it's maybe not as likely to be a hormone issue because it's not varying with your natural cycle.
Mm,
So that way I can then go, okay, I don't think we should go down this path, maybe we should go down a different path to look at how we manage your symptoms.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Wow. Amazing. And yeah, I think you need to be so aware of so self-aware first. I mean, like in order to even think, oh, I feel like there's something that's off and go to see you, like that person needs to have a certain level of self-awareness, right? Because
Yeah.
sometimes issues don't they might not come up as like a traditional type of illness or disease, like but there's sometimes you just feel there's something off with your body. Um and so that links me to the next point. And I know that you actually are the author of a book called The Tiredness Cure, which you wrote several years ago, actually. And when I met you, I didn't even know that you had a book. Um, so I guess all of that is related to what you're talking about now, about hormone health. Um, but do you want to share a little bit more about that book and maybe what you think is the reason why so many people feel so tired in our, like in the past few years, I guess.
I mean, the book's 10 years old, actually, so it
Mm.
is quite an old book. But I wrote it when I was mainly a sort of full time conventional GP. And the
Mm.
reason I wrote it is because so many people would come in with tiredness. I'd run the labs, and as a GP, without, having as many tools to my belt as I have now, I'd be like, your labs are normal, so good news. And I remember this woman, like, she almost cried in front of me once. She was like, don't tell me things are normal. I've just told you I feel awful. There must be something I can do. And then that led me to do some of the research I've done into all the different methods of tiredness. And certainly there are medical things that could be causing your tiredness. So if you've got low iron, or there's a thyroid issue, or your vitamin D level is low.
Mm.
But in the majority of cases, that isn't the case. So why is someone so tired? Now, hormone
Mm.
balance has a huge impact on that. But equally, so does the quality of your sleep,
Mm-hmm.
your nutrition. Are you getting enough fruit and veg? I feel like now a lot of us know about those things, but maybe 10 years ago, people didn't know as much about those things. But, in answer to your question, which was, why do I think, or why do you think, tiredness has got worse over the last few years? I mean, if you look at the amount of stress people are under compared to maybe, say, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, we have smartphones. So we're always connected now, which in some ways is great, right? You and I couldn't be having this conversation without modern technology in the way we are. But it means that not everyone gets enough downtime now. I grew up without social media. I'm aging myself there. Um, and what I'd say is that it was bad enough comparing myself to the other 30 girls in my class, let alone
Mm.
comparing myself to everybody on Instagram. And
Mm.
everything's got a cost, right? So we're also spending more time indoors and feeling like connected on social media, but not necessarily connected in person. All these things end up putting strain on your adrenal glands. And our adrenal glands are responsible for producing our stress hormones. We know about adrenaline and noradrenaline, but there's also cortisol, which is a lot easier to measure. And I see so many people where their cortisol is either sky high, meaning their body is on overdrive, like they are being chased by a bear in the woods, but actually
Mm.
it's just being caused by their work calls or their children, um, or meetings that are very stressful, or watching telly very late at night, or watching scary films late at night. Or I see a lot of people in burnout where their cortisol is so low. I'm like, wow, how are you even functioning? Because your cortisol has lost its adaptive response because you just are looking quite burnt out. And your
Mm.
cortisol should be high in the morning and low at night, and their cortisol
Mm-hmm.
is just low all day. So
Wow.
I think looking at ways to regulate our stress hormone is absolutely critical for our health going forward. Um,
Mm.
and I can talk about this because I'm someone who's had to do this for myself.
Yes.
Um, Obviously, as you mentioned, you and I are both trained breathwork instructors. That's one of the reasons I wanted to do the course, because I think breathwork is such a practical tool in managing your stress hormones. Um, we learned some techniques, right? Chanting and
Mm-hmm.
humming. All those things have a really positive impact on reducing your stress hormones and calming down the vagus nerve.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and just looking for little mindful moments, which I know you're a big advocate of mindfulness, and
Yes.
really looking at where can you take a mindful moment to, appreciate the view. I work in an office with no window, so like actually maybe physically
Mm.
leaving the building, taking a quick walk around the block. Um, Also, I keep Florida oil in my room, Florida water. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's used
I
in a lot of sort of
haven't.
spiritual settings. So yeah, so it's like from the Amazon originally, and I basically squirt a few pumps in my hands, rub it together, take a few mindful, calming breaths to bring me back to center, bring my
Mm.
energy back down so I can then be of service in a different way to people. So I'm all about finding little micro things you can do, as opposed to telling a very stressed out person, go and do a yoga class for an hour. And you'd be like, oh, I don't have time. I can't do it. And the other thing I'm a big advocate of is something called net time, no extra
Yeah,
time. And that
NET.
would essentially be doing something for you when when you're doing something else. So I can give you an example from my own life. On my commute, I could either be like checking my work emails or, you know, taking calls, or I could be listening to a song I really enjoy that's getting me in a good frame of mind. I could be listening to a funny podcast that's, again, nourishing me, reading a book I enjoy. So I try to use my commute time to do something for me. And that's going to put me in a better state then when I get to work. And same when I leave work, something that helps me unwind before I get home.
Yes. Yes. I mean, there are so many points I can add to with what you just said, but a big point is like, I think what you said about you taking time for yourself in order to fully give to your clients. I think that's a big, it really relates to what I talk about in terms of sustainability in the wider sense, because a lot of people are always talking about environmental sustainability, how we can do more for the environment and everything, but sometimes when we're not even filling our own cup, it's difficult to then reach out to help the community around us or the people around us and fully be present, right? And that's what I felt for a while, because I was really just sitting in front of my computer writing a lot of articles about sustainability, but ironically I wasn't even living very, very sustainably, and I also felt like a lack of in-person connection, and it didn't feel sustainable for my own health either. So I pause and I'm like, even though I'm writing about all this, I'm not showing up as the best version of myself. I'm not doing the things that light me up the most, which is like this is definitely like, is this sustainable for me and for the world? Like, I think a big part of being sustainable also is doing things that light you up, because that type of energy like comes across, and other people can feel it. So I think that, yeah, what you said, like doing things that make you happy and making sure you fill your own cup first is so important. Links like to this other point that I wanted to ask you about, more about spiritual health, because I know you're an integrative doctor, and spirituality, it's not like, a lot of it is not, it's not based on data or statistics, but I'm just wondering whether that element you look into when you speak to your clients.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point that you've raised. And I think that to a degree, maybe in the West, a lot of people have lost the original sort of community they used to have, right? Because it used to be all based around the church, and now less
Yeah.
people are going to church. You know, less people are having the community then and the support that the church brings. And a lot of us now are looking for our own spirituality, whatever that means, and whether that's with a god, or whether that's a connection to nature or the universe or
Mm.
people. Um, I'm studying psychedelics at the moment. Yeah, one of the big things, I've looked at, obviously when people take psychedelics, it relates in a lot of different ways, but we've also looked at the history of psychedelics. And for example, the Native Americans, the psychedelics were part of their church, it was part of their community. It wasn't
Okay.
necessarily like how maybe a lot of people take it nowadays, which is just for self enlightenment. It was also about the community's enlightenment and what I'm going to take this for the best of my community. And I feel like maybe some of that has been lost in the way we can all be quite individually focused now. and maybe think about our needs over the greater needs, which again, I think comes back to your point on sustainability, because it could be about looking at, well, what's best for me and the wider community, as opposed to
Mm.
sort of the, sort of, oh, let me just look at what's best for me and then screw the community, right? So
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah, yeah,
feel
yeah.
like,
It's like there needs to be a balance, but you can't also
yeah,
just be like, what's the best for the community? Like, let's just doing everything for other people and not care about myself. Like, that also doesn't work.
yeah, totally. And I've been in that situation before where, maybe a doctor, I've been maybe over giving and not looking
Mm,
after myself and my own
mm,
needs in the same way. And obviously, then like you said, you can't pour from an empty cup. So
mm,
I think it's really important to look at yourself. But going back to what I was talking about with the Native Americans, a big part of their culture is something called animism. And what that is
mm,
seeing life or spirit in
mm,
everything. So that could be in the trees, in the mountains, um, in nature, just seeing everything as having a spirit. And
mm,
I think bringing a little bit of that into our Western culture can really help people connect. Because again, maybe some people
mm.
don't want to go down the conventional religion route, but if we can look at everything having, some sort of spirit in it, then we can feel more connected. And I did sort of a animism walk the other day where I just kind of didn't have my headphones in. It wasn't like looking at my phone. And I was just, really appreciating the water and the trees and, the birds, and really looking at everything and
Yeah,
appreciating it, as opposed to just, oh, I'm on my walk to get my steps and not really being present in the moment. Um,
yeah,
so yeah, I think that
wow.
having some form of spiritual connection, whatever that is to you, it's not my job to tell you how you should see spirituality, but I think that can definitely help people feel a lot more grounded and connected. And I think a lot of
Yeah.
people these days do feel quite ungrounded and quite disconnected because of the way we're living our lives.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, for people like you and I who are so passionate about what we do, because I mean, you're obviously super passionate and you're taking courses, you're building up your brand. What do you like? How do you sort of separate that from your own life, like that work life separation, and prevent yourself from burning out? How do you do that for yourself?
I'll be honest with you, and I don't have all the answers yet, but I think I'm getting better as time goes on. I'm also someone who works for myself, so again, that can be quite tricky. I used to work in a different organization, and it was very much like turn up at 9, leave at 5, and then you close the laptop and you're done. And as an entrepreneur and someone who runs their own business, that isn't always the case. I think one part of it is that I used to see what I did as maybe a whole part of my identity. And now I
Mm,
think that it's a smaller part of my identity. So if something is your whole identity, then you are going to be working day and night to be filling this, because that's who you see yourself as. But then I went on a retreat maybe like 10 years ago or so, and I just kind of realized how unhealthy that is to have my whole identity based on one aspect of myself. And now I see myself more as a whole person. So yes, I am a doctor, but there's other things in my life. I'm also a friend and a daughter and a sister and an auntie. And I'm also somebody who has other things I enjoy in life. I enjoy going to concerts. I enjoy, listening to music. I enjoy having conversations with people like we are today. So
going to Christmas markets like we did
yeah,
last
we
year.
we had a really good time at the Christmas market.
Mhm.
I think like broadening your identity, or broadening my identity, has really helped me to sort of see myself more as a whole person. Um, and look, I will be honest, nearly every day, even if I'm off, maybe even not always when I'm on holiday, but there's often times I have to work or do elements of my work or reply to an
Mm,
email or something like that. But I'm trying to get better with the boundaries as well, which I think that a lot of us can struggle with. I think especially women, we do struggle with boundaries. The other thing is, I think I've got a bit better at communicating my boundaries, because before maybe I just
Mm,
had my own boundaries, but I wouldn't tell anybody what they were, so people didn't know that
yeah,
that was a
yeah, it's
boundary
one
for me.
sided.
And they'd be like, "Why are you ignoring my emails?" And I'm like, "Oh no, I have a boundary. I don't reply to them on the weekends." But I'd never communicated that with anybody, so nobody
Yeah,
knew. So
that
yeah,
is a
I think
good point. It's a
yeah,
like it's one thing to set up your own energetic mental boundaries in your head, but if you don't communicate it and you suddenly change your approach, people will be confused,
yeah.
right?
And I think
Yeah.
people get used to you being a certain way, and we're always changing and evolving. And obviously, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you haven't really communicated that to people, then they'll be quite confused as to why you're being different.
Yeah, yeah, that's so true. Um, no, I wanted to go back to your point about, the whole idea about identity and viewing yourself as a whole person. That was also part of my discovery when I decided to launch this podcast. Because again, like when I was writing a lot and everything and doing a lot of research, I just felt like very disconnected from my core, like the core things that really lit me up and make me happy. So I started to just write out every single day, like what are the moments where I'm most energized. And it was just those small moments of connecting with people or taking a photo or learning something new or moving my body. So I actually started this for almost for me. It's like it's these are my core things, especially connecting with people in photography, that consistently making me happy. Like these are, I mean, to go back to your metaphor, like my own foundations that I want to keep building on. So I think it's important for people to have that, like whether it's part of their work or not, like to have and be aware of those things that light them up.
Yeah,
Because like,
definitely.
right, right.
Yeah. I'm a huge advocate of therapy if somebody thinks it's useful for them or necessary. And one of the things I've worked on is literally what you were saying, just noticing those things. Because again, I might be
Mm,
very good at noticing for other people, but not necessarily noticing for myself. And it's about training myself to notice for myself as well. And literally just feeling where the energy is in the body. And like if I'm feeling lit up or excited, the energy feels like it's going upwards in my body. And then if I'm not feeling those things, it can feel like, oh, being dragged down, not really feeling the energy. And again, just noting those things of like, when I feel lit up, I think that's why people use that expression, because you feel like this upwards of energy, like light in your body. What am I doing when I feel lit up? And what am I doing when I'm not feeling lit up? If I'm feeling heavier, and trying to minimize those things that are pulling me down and working on the things that are pulling me up.
yeah. Oh, I love that. Minimize those things pulling you down and working. What did you say? Working on the things pulling you up?
Yeah, trying to bring more of that into my life.
So, I mean, the next question I wanted to ask you was like, as an integrative doctor, right? Like, for yourself, what do you think is the main next thing you want to work on in terms of like mind, body, soul, health? Like, is there an aspect that you're like, oh, this is what I want to focus on next?
Well, there's a few things. One of the ongoing things that I'm always working on is how to manage stress better.
Mm,
And like minimizing things and pulling me down and bringing me more stress. And how can I create that better work life balance?
mm.
The other thing is, I think I did Everest base camp about in
Oh,
October
yes.
2022. um
Yeah.
yeah, and that was amazing. And obviously my fitness is really good to be able to do that, and my fitness hasn't been as good since, because I was quite ill after, and then life
Mm.
gets in the way. So I kind of want to work on getting my fitness back to what it was, because healthy body, healthy mind. So I think that's always a good connection as well.
Yeah. So you were talking about wanting to manage stress, right? Like has this stress, like now or in the past, like affected your any of your relationships, do you think?
Yeah, I guess so, potentially, because I think that if you you're carrying a lot of anxiety, or you are, constantly worried about what someone else is thinking, maybe, then you're not going to be giving your best self. So,
Mm,
in some ways, I would say that, some of the stress has caused me to be very driven. So there's been some maybe benefit from it, from pushing me to like go and do certain things. But at the same time, that's not really the way I want to work anymore. I don't want to be like dragged from place to place because my stress is like making me want to do loads and achieve loads. And, I don't want to be coming from a place of like ego or status. I want to be coming from a more embodied place, which is service orientated, but also, like I said, not over giving, and having time for myself, and also having, resources for myself. I think that's really important.
mm,
So I've been looking at lots of different ways of working that's going to help me, because obviously, I really do like what I do. I'm passionate about it. I think I'm good at it. So obviously, I want to be of service
you
to other
are.
people. But I
Mhm.
don't want to burn myself out either. So always looking at different ways of working so I can give people my best, but also, you know, well, who knows? I was going to say we only have one life. I mean, who knows really? But, I want to enjoy this life as well, and not just make it about, being service driven. I think
Mm.
I'm getting quite a good balance now.
Yeah, yeah. What does that balance look like? What do you do outside of your work and creating a lot of content or learning new things related to integrative health?
So I love spending time with my niece and my nephews, and
Hmm.
that's like just beautiful and really fulfilling to see how they're growing and changing as individuals. I love being in nature, so I like, being by the sea or going for walks in the mountains. I love seeing my friends. That's always very nourishing. Like I like to have sort of like, I guess you'd say, deeper relationships. I don't have many superficial friendships, so it's really good
Yes.
to be with people where you can have really open conversations that are nourishing, where you can support each other. And I love travel. So, booking some trips is always good to have in the diary, because I don't like to necessarily just travel for the sake of it, but I like going to different places, learning about new cultures, seeing different sites, and that really fills me up too.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, I was reading another article about how friendships actually directly affect your immunity. I'm sure you probably know that. I think the study talked about how people who have a certain amount of closer friends were more reacted better to this COVID vaccine compared to those that didn't. And I think that, I mean, that's another element of holistic health, right? Like, it's not medicine that we consume, but it is actual medicine. Like, it gives you happiness and energy.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I can't quote the papers off the top of my head, but
Yeah,
I
yeah.
know there's been a lot of research on community and loneliness, and how that affects your lifespan and your quality of life and your health. So definitely, investing in those friendships and relationships, I think, is really, really important, and really core. I think that's one of my core things is, having a close community of people who I can rely on, and they can rely on me, and we can share our lives. That's really, really valuable to me.
Mm-mm-mm. And since you're onto that, I mean, what would you say your core things are?
Okay. So I would say, definitely friends and family. That's really important to me, and giving them enough time and having quality time with them. Having a spiritual connection is very important to me, and spending time on that. Um,
Mm,
Definitely learning is something, like I
mm,
said, I really, really enjoy. And
mm,
my own health and wellness and fitness is very important to me as
mm,
well.
mm, mm.
And, a big part of my work is empowering people, and especially empowering women. That's really, really
Mhm,
important to me. So that's kind of the driving force between my work. So I
mm,
feel like
mm.
that's a good balance of work core things and personal core things.
Yes, yes, absolutely. There's also something else I know you work on a lot as well, because I know you like to talk to men a lot about women's health because you think that men being educated on women's health as well is always going to be valuable in our society. Um, can you tell me a bit more about that? Like, why do you think that's important? And what are the men's reactions to you sharing about things that maybe they have no idea about?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think it's a two-way system. I think men need to know about women's health, but equally, women need to understand a bit about men's health as
Mm,
well. Because
mm,
I think, if we're sort of leaving behind sort of, the toxic shame and masculinity and also sort of toxic femininity, we have to meet in the middle and we have to both value the gifts that men bring and women bring and, value those things instead of fighting against each other. So, as much as I'm an advocate for women's rights and, women's health, it doesn't mean I don't think men's health is important or men's rights. I think both things are equally
absolutely.
important. And I think the
Yeah.
more we can understand each other, men understanding what happens in a woman's life with her hormones and her cycle and in menopause and how that massively impacts a woman and her identity and how she feels at certain times, that's going to help a man understand what a woman goes through. And equally, if we as women can understand what's going on in a man's world, and, I see a lot of male patients as well, and understand sometimes, they have different drives to us to provide, and, that sort of toxic masculinity that's been promoted in the past of, you have to like show no emotion and you have to be very solid and you have to not express anything. I think if we can understand each other better, we can support each other better. And I think that's really what the world needs at the moment.
Okay, so we're on to the last two questions. Um, First, what does sustainability mean to you? We talked about this a little bit just now, but maybe just reiterate your main points.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think what sustainability means to me is like, whatever, like say whatever your mission is or whatever you want to do, it's about doing that in a way that means you're not going to burn out. So, really looking at things from what's sustainable for you, because if you can then, you know manage your energy, you can manage the way you want to do things, then you can be of better service, and it's going to impact you in a positive way personally. So I kind of look at more personal sustainability more.
Agreed. Exactly what I wanted to emphasize on this podcast. And then what gives you peace?
What gives me peace? So feeling grounded, being in nature, um, connection. So, you're having great conversations with people, authentic conversations. I think that's really peaceful for me. And being
Mm.
around my nephew and my nephews and my niece, very grounding.
Mm. Oh, amazing. Yeah, all of those things, like family, being in nature, authentic conversations, all those things give me peace as well. Um, and this conversation, definitely, like I feel very at ease and at peace speaking to you, even though we're in like different cities and very far apart. So I just wanted to thank you for being here today. It was just, I mean, like since the first time I met you at the breathwork course, I knew you were a person who was very inspired, very driven, had a lot to share, and it's such an honor to have you share part of your story and like so much of what you know on this podcast. And I'm sure you'll continue giving so much to this world and so much to like the world of integrative medicine. And I'm excited about what you do next.
Thank you. It's been so good talking to you today.
Thank you. Okay. If you enjoyed this episode, please like or subscribe wherever you're watching or listening. This will really help my content rise to the top so that I can continue creating content that uplifts and inspires our community.